Hello and welcome to the finale of the London School of Economics presents One India Talks in association with NISAO. My name is Abrar Agbotwala and this is my colleague Ritika Abraham.
Good evening.
One of the original themes of the One India Talks was to converse with luminaries with the power to effect real change. Today, we are in conversation with a tremendously popular politician in the seat of power. She has been an established professional in the entertainment industry before joining the Bharatiya Janata Party in 2003. She quickly rose the ranks and has held many plum portfolios in the two Modi governments. Famously also known as the slayer of Amethi and a true disruptor of modern Indian politics. Today, joining us in the capacity of the Cabinet Minister of Women and Child Development and Textiles, it is my privilege to welcome to the LSE One India Talks the Honourable Minister Smriti Irani ji. Namaskar, ma'am, and thank you very much for being here with us today. We appreciate you joining us in the midst of a dramatic COVID second wave and the upcoming Bengal elections. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Brad, for having me. I'm very happy today to exchange notes, deliberate and debate with you and Ritika.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Then let's get right to it. We'd like to begin by talking about the 2019 election results, ma'am. Despite naysayers implying the end of the Modi wave, the 2019 election saw a reinforcement of the Prime Minister Modi's popularity, giving the BJP the largest majority it has ever received. According to figures from a global data intelligence firm, Morning Consult, indicates that between 73 and 75% of people approve of Prime Minister Modi. What would you say then the critics of the BJP and Prime Minister Modi got wrong in their analysis?
I think they didn't read the pulse of the people in our country. In a country which is as vibrant, democratically and culturally like ours, there was an assumption that those who are a part of the elite power circles in the national capital decide the destiny of a nation of 1.3 billion people. And it is Narendra Modi's leadership that began the democratization of engagement of citizens at large, including those who are in our villages directly with the government. Abrar, I must highlight here that in the year 2013, when the Bharatiya Janata Party announced Narendra Modi as the prime ministerial candidate, we did so knowing well that the country wanted administrative reform, the country wanted transparency in governance, and the country wanted a leadership that they could depend on in times of crisis and with a desire to grow. And in the year 2014, when the Prime Minister took office, one of the first promises he made to the people of our country was that even in formulation of policies, there will be use of technology to ensure that every citizen finds a voice in making of policy. Every citizen finds a voice in not only how it is implemented, but if there is a grievance regarding implementation. Narendra Modi leveraged that technology to empower our citizens more and more. I think the journey between 2014 to 2019, before the elections, was quite telling. Brar and Ritika, most of you know that we are a country of 1.3 billion people, but also a country with many aspirations, which were built on very weak foundations. When I say weak foundations, what do I mean? We had over 400 million Indian citizens, 410 million to be precise, who had never had access to a banking facility. And in 2014, Narendra Modi said that if we want to empower people and if we want to enhance their economic participation in our democracy, we need to ensure that they have transparent tools of economic engagement. And that is why the Prime Minister started a program called Jan Dhan Yojana. Now imagine after 70 years of independence, there comes a Prime Minister who says, we need to ensure that everybody in our country has a bank account, because we want to ensure that if we want to extend cash transfers or for that matter, subsidy support to our citizens, we do not see a role for middlemen. We want to ensure that that engagement is direct to the treasury of India. And that is why in the 5 years of the first phase of the Narendra Modi government, we saw 410 million citizens get a bank account for the first time in their lives. Now that is truly ensuring that economic power percolates to the grassroots. Now, I'm sure students like Ritika have also introspected on the sanitation challenges that many women in India faced. Imagine we had over 300 million people who never had an access to a household toilet. So Narendra Modi started a clarion call for sanitation projects like Swachh Bharat Yojana. And in the 5 years of his first time, he ensured that over 300 million people had access to a toilet in their own household. Now, these are for you possibly sitting in London, are given in everyday life. But imagine 300 million people beginning that day with these challenges. And I think that it is that connect to not only the people, but also their challenges and converting them into solution that we saw such a dramatic outpouring of support democratically for Narendra Modi, and we saw a historical mandate in 2019.
Thank you, ma'am.
Honourable Minister, there has been a long history of actors and performers joining politics in our country as they enjoy the support and loyalty of the Indian public. Did you see your move into public service as something of a natural progression, or was there another motivation behind your joining the BJP in 2003?
Ritika, I've actually been a part of a social and political activist group before I came into electoral politics. In fact, before 2003, I had served a good 2.5 years in my country as a USAID ambassador to India for the ORS program. I had been connected to the grassroots on issues of child health, on issues of women's safety. And remember, at that time, I was just 24 years old. So I began my journey pretty early, but as a political activist, it began earlier, in my teens. So I created quite a conundrum when it came to engaging with power centers on issues of policy, which range from education to employment to, let's say, policy at the workplace for women and for people at large. So for me, it was a natural progression into an electoral body. And the reason why I chose to have that progression was that while I was doing social work, as they so call it, in especially challenged districts, where we endeavored to provide water to tribal families, where we endeavored to provide better educational prospects to children from poor families, I recognize at the age around of 24, 25, that change actually happens when you become a policymaker. And to be a policymaker who has a continuous engagement with the grassroots, you need to be an elected policymaker. So my endeavors and my desire to ensure that I could affect policy is what got me into a political party. And the fact that I chose the BJP is because I was ideologically aligned and inclined towards the organization. So for me, it was a natural progression. When there is a sunset approaching in their media professions, I chose to join right at the peak of my career, because I think that people need to recognize that it cannot be a second option when the first option dwindles. For me, I was ready to sacrifice a very successful career, a great pay packet, because I believed in the fact that our people deserved participants who are extremely dedicated in terms of time, effort, and energy towards a larger goal of bettering prospects for our citizens.
Thank you, ma'am. You mentioned that you left at the peak of your career, and now I would say you're at the peak of your career in your political space. So talking.
Not yet.
That's always great to hear, ma'am. But yeah, so staying with that, I saw in an Instagram post of yours, actually, ma'am, in memoriam of the former External Affairs Minister of India, Sushma Swaraj, you seem to share a very special relationship with her. And in talking about your victory in Amethi now, which has been a Congress bastion for decades, in the 2019 election, you won the seat of Amethi by a margin of 55,000 plus votes. And many have called this one of the biggest upsets of modern Indian politics. So coming back to that Instagram post in which you wrote that you were so confident in your victory that you had a pre-planned lunch with Sushma Swaraj. So can you walk us through what it takes to unseat such a dynastic seat as Amethi?
Audacity and tenacity. I think that abroad, when you have nothing to lose, then you give everything of yourself to that fight. The story of David and Goliath is not new to you. And I think that is what I looked upon as the Amethi electoral fight. Now, the difference was that I come from a family with limited economic means as I grew up. And I recognize how important it is for the poor to not only strive, but actually be assured of better opportunities. These were the opportunities that were denied to the people of Amethi. I just became that fulcrum where all the aspirations, the desire, the angst of Amethi could come together in the hope for a better tomorrow. So when you talk about upsetting a family dynasty, which actually had roots in that one constituency for over 5 decades, it was a people's revolt against a family that did not give the people their due politically, electorally, and administratively. People in a democracy do not want to be taken for granted. They will give you much adulation, you will be much adored. But in a society which is becoming more and more conscious of the responsibility of elected officials, in a society which is recognizing that we come into positions of administration, or as you call it, abroad, positions of power, not to enjoy that power, but take on a responsibility to serve. I think that the Gandhi family missed that change in Indian democracy. So for MP, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, to be stuck in those chapters of history where he thought that he does a great favor upon the citizens of Amethi by being their representative, I think he somewhere missed the fact that the people genuinely were looking for a public servant, which is what I am.
Thank you, ma'am. I want to stay with something that you just mentioned and the idea of how it was a people revolt. So I want to stay with the idea of popular sentiment. You have said that after your victory in Amethi, that was just step one, and that in the next election, the BJP would also win Raebareli, which is another Congress stronghold. So again,
I said I shall not be challenged.
Okay,
I
all
said,
right.
and to be very, very clear, I said that the Congress should not genuinely push me in that direction.
Okay, ma'am. So my question to you is then, what makes you so confident in saying that the people of Raebareli and Uttar Pradesh will support the BJP more in 2024?
Abrar, as we speak today, we are today facing one of the greatest pandemics the world has ever seen. It is incumbent upon every public representative to be available to its people, irrespective of your own political office. The challenge with Raebareli is, with all due respect to the current member of parliament there, that the member of parliament is an absentee member of parliament. And that is why, when you talk about a change in public perspective and expectations, you need to recognize that one constituency cannot be living in the 1950s, beholden to a dynasty. This is a constituency as well that is hoping that the person that they elect serves them, especially in times of calamity. And that is why I'm absolutely certain that when my party decides to give a tough fight in Raebareli, my party will win. But I also think one needs to add here that irrespective of Brar, whether you win or lose, I lost in 2014. We serve with a desire to help people. That is a natural inclination in a politician. And if you do not have that inclination or the desire, especially to be in a position of support when people are facing some of the toughest challenges in their lives, you have no business then occupying that position. So I think today, when Raebareli needs a hospital, they know that their own member of parliament is not available. They will sheepishly put in a call to me and say, Didi, can you help? Though we did not elect you or your party. And I tell them that this is not a time to play politics. No person shall be turned away. So I think that the difference between the Congress style of politics and the political ideology of the Bharatiya Janata Party is this. For Congress, politics is being done for power and to sustain a dynasty. For the Bharatiya Janata Party, we are genuinely in a position of service, and we know that the people of our country, of our constituency, will only elect us if we are earnest in our attempts to bring solutions to them.
Ma'am, it's very interesting that you bring up absenteeism, because Priyanka Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi were supposed to be the star campaigners for the Congress in West Bengal. At first, we didn't see very much of Priyanka Gandhi, and we saw a little bit more of Rahul Gandhi. Now, Mr. Gandhi and many leaders have suspended their in person rallies. But before they did so, were you surprised by the lack of Gandhi family presence in West Bengal, given
Not at
how
all. Why, Ritika? Because they are never known to show up when there is challenges aplenty for their people. When I spoke to Abrar about the fact that there's an absentee MP in times of crisis in a constituency, it is but reflective of the same principle of working. Let's say in the Gandhi siblings being absent instead of supporting their workers in times of elections, or for that matter, in times of political challenges. I think that has become now the main hallmark and characteristic of that family. But like I said, it is the people of the country that best decide their political fate.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's move on to the ongoing and the Bengal elections that are currently underway. There seems to be a renewed interest and vigor on the part of the BJP this time in Bengal. What do you think that the BJP is doing differently this time around than in any previous campaign?
Well, the state of Bengal has seen over 3 decades of the communist rule. The past 10 years have been the rule of the Trinamool Congress. And in both these instances, it is the Congress party that partnered with both these political establishments. So in total, you've had the Congress, the left, and the Trinamool Congress taking over power spaces for over 4 decades in a state. Now, citizens obviously presume that if you have uninterrupted power for 4 decades, then at least needs such as infrastructure needs, or for that matter, social sector needs will be met. However, that was not the case in the state of West Bengal. And when Abrari spoke about the 2019 elections, one of the most startling results for the Indian press was the result in the Lok Sabha seats of West Bengal. So much so that murmurs began in 2019 that the ensuing assembly election will see a massive change. There were many who poo-pooed the idea in the opposition and said, well, the BJP will have absolutely no chance and there'll be absolutely no people available to support the Bharatiya Janata Party. Recently, since you must be following much of Indian politics on Twitter, you had the campaign manager of the sitting chief minister come on Twitter in a conversation and accept that yes, the people of Bengal find Narendra Modi's politics extremely popular. They want Narendra Modi's development agenda now, even in the state of Bengal. So after 4 decades of misgovernance, now Bengal is looking towards the sunrise of development.
Ma'am, as the BJP star campaigner in West Bengal, the party seems to be pushing for a very strong developmental agenda that believes in a Shonar Bangla or a Golden Bengal. What is the BJP promising that the TMC couldn't deliver in the last 10 years?
So, Ritika, for any investment to come to a particular state, there are 3-4 prerequisites that the state administration needs to confirm to companies or to industry associations and bodies. One is law and order, which was in tatters in the state of West Bengal, where the political leadership and the chief minister herself was found on many an occasion stating that please do not take money, kickback money, return it immediately after elections, let the elections get over, and then let's look at our politics anew. Now, even one such statement is a good enough indication to industry at large that you cannot do business transparently in the state when the head of government herself would propagate these kind of practices. So apart from law and order, apart from transparent governance, the other problem is the state of infrastructure. And I think that apart from infrastructure, the entire investment atmosphere of West Bengal was lacking. So when the Bharatiya Janata Party, especially in this assembly election, went to the polls, we went on the plank of development. So what are the main issues? We are today talking about issues of safety and security of our citizens. Let me give you a small example. I hold the charge of women and child development in the Cabinet of India. We in the Modi government decided that every police station in India will have a women's help desk. The entire country accepted this particular decision. We said that we will back the decision with money so that the financial accruals for establishing women's help desk across all police stations are borne by the central government. However, the West Bengal government did not accept the proposal. We started a program under Narendra Modi's leadership, which is the world's largest nutrition program, catering to over 80 million women and young children. It has been accepted by every state government, irrespective of the political party which is in power. However, the state of West Bengal denied that nutrition program, which is tailored to only give nutritional support to poor women and children. We in the government of India said we are through the Nirbhaya Fund now financially supporting the establishment of 1,063 fast track courts so that justice is delivered speedily to women and children who are victims of violence. Every state government, irrespective of their politics, accepted that particular program of establishment of fast track courts. The state of West Bengal denied its citizens. Another aspect now, women. Apart from women, let me give you an example of farmers. You know that the Prime Minister started a program called Kisan Samman Nidhi, wherein we have in the past 2 years transferred 11 billion pounds, the bank accounts of 100 million farmers. That's a huge step, nowhere seen in the world. However, the state of Bengal denied its farmers that cash transfer. We said that if we want to do agricultural and labor reforms so that we can enhance manufacturing prospects in our country, the state of West Bengal under Mamata Bandyopadhyay opposed those reforms. So I think that when you ask me, Ritika, what is it that we propose for people in the state? The Prime Minister started, of a program called Ayushman Bharat Yojana, wherein 100 million Indian families will get free medical service in over 24,000 hospitals across the country. The state of West Bengal denied that facility to its citizens. So when we went to polls for this assembly election, we had told the people of our country, of the state of West Bengal, that these are the programs that will get implemented. And Ritika, this is not only hyperbole. The citizens of West Bengal have seen the implementation of these programs across the country. And now they're waiting for that development agenda to reach them electorally, politically, and administratively.
Thank you, ma'am. So the move of several TMC MPs, notably Suvendu Adhikari, was seen to be a noteworthy move, especially since he is the BJP's candidate from Mamata Banerjee's constituency of Nandigram. Would you say that...
I would like to interrupt you then.
Sure, ma'am. Sorry.
Her constituency was Bhawanipur. She left her own constituency.
Okay. But would you say that his involvement in the BJP will be instrumental should they be victorious on the 2nd of May?
I think that what is instrumental in this particular election has been the development agenda. Ritika, what was amazing in my entire tenure of campaign in the state was that in meeting after meeting, the Prime Minister said, let's talk about development agenda, us versus you. Let's talk about your 10 years of work in the state of West Bengal so that we can do a comparative. And let's engage on those issues and see which one of us becomes a better prospect for the people. But Mamata Banerjee absolutely refused to talk about her tenure of administration intervention in the state. So when you talk about which is that factor, that X factor that will result in a BJP victory, I think I'm proud of the fact that we have focused and kept the focus only on the development issue in West Bengal. And with the victory of the Bharatiya Janata Party, it will be yet again established that development has become the mainstay of how a constituency or how citizens vote. I must here highlight to both you and Abrar. If you remember, I don't even know whether you were born then, but if you remember, one of the first people to make Bijli Sadak Pani, which is electricity, road, and water, a political electoral issue, that leader was Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So whoever is interested in political history of India needs to know that it is Atal Bihari Vajpayee between the year 2000 to 2004 who said, let's stop voting on issues other than development. We are a country which is multilingual. We are a country which has many religions. We are a country with cultural diversity and a legacy which is exceptional in the world. And the only thing that should unite us in a model world, in a global community, is our not only the development agenda, but is our characteristic to work hard and fulfill our destiny and reach the standards that we set for ourselves as communities. So this is a narrative which has been ideologically set by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. It was prominently built upon by Narendra Modi. And this is exactly the narrative with which we went to the state of West Bengal assembly elections.
Thank you, ma'am. Madam Minister, in your answer, you mentioned several schemes that the West Bengal government have not accepted from the central government.
Yes.
There is a lot of talk in West Bengal specifically that Prime Minister Modi's popularity has become pervasive and that the BJP have backed the right horses this time and that on May 2nd, there will be a positive result. However, Prashant Kishore, who you mentioned earlier, who is the key strategist for the Trinamool, argued that he would quit the space as a political analyst if the BJP crossed double digits. So the question to you, ma'am, is according to you, will West Bengal take on the Modi wave come the 2nd of May?
Absolutely, Abrar. I think that since you mentioned the electoral strategist for the Mamata Banerjee government and political party of the Trinamool Congress, I will direct your attention to the electoral strategist's own conversation with journalists, where the statement that you quote, Abrar, came from an interview. And what I'm about to say comes from a Twitter chat that he had with journalists, where he accepted finally that yes, Modi is the most popular leader in Bengal. The interview you are quoting, Abrar, in that this election strategist said that BJP will not find people on the ground working for them in various booths. But in his Twitter declaration, he says that I'm telling you that on every booth in Bengal, you have a BJP worker. And in the Twitter conversation that he had weeks later, as compared to the interview that you're quoting right now, there was an exception. There was an acceptance that yes, the Bharatiya Janata Party has made very strong inroads. But I think what is also pertinent to highlight here is Ritika was talking about Nandigram. Mamata Banerjee left her constituency, went to Nandigram, and after the first phase of voting, she wrote to every political party in the country stating, I am at the precipice of defeat, literally indicating that, come help me. So I think that that was an indication enough, apart from her electoral strategist, that she knows that she's on a weak wicket. I think it is also interesting to note that if you've genuinely done development work, Abrar and Ritika, today I read out to you the policies and the monies that we put behind those policies. We heard nothing of the sort from Mamata Banerjee.
Ma'am, as many prominent states go to election in India as we speak, despite the rise in the number of COVID cases, leaders from all parties have held huge in-person political rallies with precarious social distancing and almost no mask-wearing policies. Before the suspension of these physical rallies, would you say that political leaders were ill-considered in holding these campaigns with almost no COVID protocols?
Every meeting that we hold, including, let's say, a meeting that I was a part of, we have made public declarations to ensure social distancing, to wear masks, and we insist on that even when we engage, let's say, with media spaces so that the message can be amplified. Ritika, you need to recognize this is not a message that we gave only during elections. It was incumbent upon, given the nature of governance and the election commission's decision to hold the election in certain phases, that we as political representatives live up to our responsibility. We could not have abdicated our responsibility and said, sorry, the Election Commission of India will not be adhered to. That would have been an exception in law, which we cannot constitutionally make. When the Bihar elections in last year took place, Ritika, the Bharatiya Janata Party, in fact, approached the Election Commission when the Election Commission said, can we do campaign digitally? We, in fact, supported it. And all these political parties opposed it. Last year itself, the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Janata Dal U, which is currently also again in government with the Bharatiya Janata Party in Bihar, we went into election pleading, let's do a digital campaign. Every member of the opposition party shot it down. And then Election Commission compelled everybody that fine, if you don't want to do a digital campaign, follow COVID protocols. We implored everybody. We did the same in the Bengal elections. And we insist time and again, and I've done so particularly not only as minister, but also the MP of a constituency, that people follow all COVID protocols.
Thank you, ma'am. Honourable Minister, we'd like to move on to talk about the ongoing, very dramatic second surge of infections of COVID-19 in India. We wanted to ask you, ma'am, what according to you were the factors that have contributed to this very aggressive second wave of COVID in India? And would you say that there was a sense of underpreparedness on the side of the government, or would you say that these conditions were out of the hands of the lawmakers?
Abrar, when you saw the surge in London, would you say that the United Kingdom was not prepared? You wouldn't. A pandemic never seen before in the history of humanity has infected and has actually attacked every democracy in the country. In a time of national crisis, we all stand together to serve to the best of our abilities. And I do not want to feed the cannibalization of Indian politics right now, which is something that is unfortunate and done by some members of the opposition party. But when you talk about preparedness abroad, there are one or two issues that I'd like to bring to light. In March 2020, before the lockdown, India had only, and I'm here highlighting the numbers, 2,000 ICU beds. In a 1.3 billion population in March 2020, including the private sector, we had only 2,000 ICU beds. We enhanced that to 80,000 ICU beds. In India, our medical oxygen needs and production was only 1,000 metric tons. We increased that to over 7,500 metric tons. In India, and I'm the Minister of Textile as well, in March 2020, we did not produce a single PPE suit or N95 mask in our country. We became, in 3 months, the second largest exporter in the world. That was our turnaround. So today, when I am speaking to you, we have tested over 280 million citizens, which is the largest set of human and citizenry that you've seen across any nation. As we speak today abroad, we have vaccinated over 140 million people. We are in unprecedented times facing the challenge. And let me show you how the challenge increases. The second phase or the second wave is not the same mutant as the first one. There is a variance in the mutant. It went from the 9th of April to the 16th of April. It was on the 9th of April in 113 districts. By the 16th of April, it went to around 339 districts, which means in just 7 days, it went to over 226 districts. So that is the spread that we have. But in the first wave, while we were facing all these challenges, we helped nations across the world. You will remember 160 nations received PPE suits, hydroxychloroquine, and even vaccines from India. And that is why now you have the global community responding with alacrity to the challenges in India. We have served global needs And that is why the global community comes together. What again, Abrar, I will say that I don't want to feed the frenzy that the opposition is feeding. But let me give you a small example what I mean by the cannibalization of politics in national crisis. India had a company which made an indigenous vaccine called Covaxin. And the principal opposition leaders, which included one former foreign minister, one former communications minister, actually spread the word, do not use the vaccine. I don't believe in the vaccine. Now, when your country is hit with a crisis, is that a responsible position to take? And today in India, every citizen gets to read in the newspaper that Fauci,
yes, this morning,
in the US, says that this indigenously produced vaccine can save citizens from 617 variants of the virus. Now, imagine we began our vaccination project in January 21, but the political, I think, attack on the vaccine started somewhere in October, September, October. Now, when you have political leaders attack science, that too at a time of crisis, that too when citizens and governments are coming together, I think those are the challenges which are best not brought to fore. This is a time for every individual, irrespective of their nationality or their polity, to be responsible in their engagement. And that is why, like I said, that when you talk about preparedness abroad, health is a state subject. So we cannot have any political organization or government in a state abdicate its responsibility. But I can, as a member of the Modi cabinet, assure you that we have been diligent in our service. And we hope, irrespective of who is in power in a state, to continue to do so in all our endeavors.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, the surge of cases we're seeing right now in the second wave are much more aggressive than what we saw in the first wave. And according to figures from the Health Ministry website, India posted a tally of 96,505 cases in the last 24 hours. India has been lauded for its handling of the crisis in the first wave, with mortality rates among some of the lowest in the world. According to the Health Ministry website, deaths per 100 cases went from 4% in April 2020 to 2.1% in August of 2020. And in September of the same year, it was under 2%. Do you see India's handling of the pandemic in the second wave to be as strong as it was in the first time?
Every number that we quote, Ritika, yes, India has the lowest death rate in the world. But for me, every number is a life. I cannot be inhuman enough to pontificate that, look, we have better numbers than the EU or the US. I think that would be extremely inhuman. But I can say this, that every day we hear of 100,000 people who actually recover from COVID and go back home. The only difference is that that story never gets told. 100,000 people recovering every day is not a small number. 280 million people getting tested is not a small number. To have 140 million people vaccinated in a limited time space is not a small number.
And over 20 state governments, including Delhi, have made the vaccine free of charge for eligible persons. Do you think that making the vaccine free of charge and a decision to ramp up the immunization campaign is a strategy to alleviate the apparent hesitation of the population to get inoculated?
We have consistently maintained, Ritika, from day one. Everybody, we had the first stage. If you look at the first wave and even the second wave, you will see most of the fatalities are happening in the age group of 45 and above. We have incessantly requested that everybody get vaccinated, but in a democracy, when people are at free will to take a vaccine, one has to continuously engage with the people to tell them how much of it is an necessity today, health-wise, as it is a national service. But like I said, like I told Abrar, when you have a political leader who might not be in power, but is in a position of responsibility, declare that don't touch a vaccine because they do not ideologically like Narendra Modi, I think that is the greatest disservice you do to humanity, to your own fellow citizens. So I think today what is extremely important is, as the Prime Minister had announced in January, everybody above the age of 45 in a government hospital will get the vaccine free. He then further announced that everybody above the age of 18 will get it free in a government hospital. However, those who want to privately procure it in a private hospital, that is an engagement that the states have to implement and have to overlook. And I'm hopeful that the state governments will be responsible.
Thank you, ma'am. Honorable Minister, at such a time when national interest and the nation's health is at stake, as you mentioned as well, would you say that it should be the role of the high courts or, say, for example, the states to decide what is the best for the nation? Or would you argue there's need for further centralization and a single national policy is something that's going to be beneficial to us?
I think that one needs to recognize that there is a national protocol, and that protocol is such that states are free to, in some way, structure it according to their local needs. In a federal system, you have consistently seen the Prime Minister engage with every Chief Minister to ensure that we as a nation face this challenge collectively. Again, like I said, irrespective of our politics, our dedication of resources and efforts is towards ensuring that we enable our citizens to come out of this health crisis or this health challenge. But like I said, Abrar, health is a state subject. So while we create a national platform for engagement with state governments, ultimately it is the responsibility of the state governments, because we are not a monarchy. And we have a federal structure wherein the states are responsible for implementation, but we have positioned ourselves such that we will continue to support every need of the state. Our appeal has been continuous that while government at the state and the center is ramping up all the administrative infrastructure and medical needs of the country, at the same time, we want the citizen to participate in ensuring that COVID protocols are followed. I am particularly happy to share with you that irrespective of the first wave or the second, we have seen an outpouring of citizen support for each other and for administrative services. And it is together that we as a nation have faced this pandemic.
Thank you, Minister ma'am. Let's move on. We want to spend some time to discuss the role and status of women in India today. Minister ma'am, I'd like to take you back slightly into 2018. At the Raisina Dialogue, which is organized by the Observer Research Foundation in 2018, you spoke at a panel called Policy, Politics and Gender. And in preparing for the panel as an experiment, you said that you had asked aspiring female policy analysts to provide talking points for the panel. And you mentioned that none of them said that women could be the focal point of the economy because they are competent. You also went on to say the fact that there were 5 women on that panel having to justify why they're as competent as any man is where the root cause of the issue lies. So apart from the National Commission for Women, which has reported 100% rise in domestic violence in April of 2020, there's also been a reportage of a string of several rape cases and just discrimination against women. So my question is this mentality which you were speaking about of restrictive women's roles contributing to the rise in violence and discrimination of women in India today?
So I would like to answer that question in 3 parts. First is the National Commission for Women. When you talk about that percentage of 100%, abroad the total number of cases is 2,000 in a 1.3 billion country. However, when we delved deep into the numbers, many of those cases were domestic issues that were unresolved at the state, and during the pandemic were heightened or escalated to the National Commission for Women. Because I asked the National Commission of Women, could they tell me whether there was an escalation of domestic violence cases only during the pandemic? There was a firm no from them. In fact, there was a clarification given by them on Twitter saying that that daily report was incorrect by a newspaper. However, when you ask me on issues such as safety and security of women, one must here, since you quote me from Raisina Dialogues in 18, highlight that in the year 2017, the Prime Minister insisted that we have a one-stop crisis center for women across our country in every district. In the last 2 years, we set up over 700 such crisis centers. And only in the pandemic, it helped rescue over 300,000 women. During the pandemic, we kept every helpline in the entire country open to help women in need or in distress. And there were 36 helplines that were functional across the country. Additionally, as I had said earlier, we set up over 1,063 fast-track courts. We set up not only help desks across India, barring the state of West Bengal, we also engaged with the Ministry of Home Affairs to ensure that we gave every police station forensic kits so that victims of violence do not move from one establishment to another to get themselves tested or medically checked or for that evidence kit to be made. So those are the steps that we took administratively. Legislatively, we are currently in the formulation of the country's first comprehensive trafficking bill in order to protect women and children. Additionally, we made sure in our government to bring about death penalty for rape and gang rape of young girls. And that was done under the Modi government. So from establishing crisis centers across the country, and if I tell you the number of women who got help only from the helplines, that number is crossed 5 million women. So I think I am, in one way, happy about the fact that women are not being dissuaded from reporting a crime. Because there was a presumption about India that women do not report if they are victims. Now, that being said, there has been even stakeholder and public contribution towards raising that awareness towards gender violence. But one must here highlight, Ubra, we are not the only community or citizenry that faces challenges with regards to women and safety. You are today sitting in another country's national capital. I'm sure that you know of many cases which include campus violence against women. Our endeavor is that women, A, not be victims of violence. Unfortunately, if they are, then they have access to medical, legal, and police support. And that is what was envisaged and implemented. But in the recent budget announcements, we've also made sure that we add to that capacity and have 300 more one-stop crisis centers made in the country. We are currently in budgetary negotiations with the Ministry of Finance, but I'm hopeful that we'll get the budgetary support as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, as the Union Minister for Women and Child Development, you had criticized the Chief Minister of Uttarakhand's comment on women wearing ripped jeans. Apart from being the Minister for Women and Child Development, why did you feel it was necessary for you to step forward and criticize what he said?
I just said, Ritika, that nobody conscientiously would like to demean women, which includes public representatives. I famously said that the only way I'm getting to rip any jeans is if I forcibly try to fit into my own ones. I have categorically said that as politicians, it's our responsibility to serve and not to dictate what people wear or what they eat. But I must here say that these noises come from every political party. This is not the distinction of only one political party. So we had Congress party members talk about it. In fact, so much so that since I took on the mantle of fighting the dynasty in Amethi, it is the Gandhi family relatives who indulge in sexual slurs. It has been famously said in one of my interviews in CNN IBN with a reporter called Maria Shakil. You may want to go to YouTube and check it out. So I think that the holier than thou attitude which is cast upon the dynasty needs a little bit of exposing. These are not statements made. You would never expect Rahul Gandhi to pat a man on the back who has a sexual slur hurled at me, but he has. Now you can never imagine it, but he has. Promoted him, in fact. So I think that people in positions of service, or for that matter, people at large, irrespective of whether they have this responsibility or not, it is incumbent upon every citizen, men and women, because it's not as though women also do not taunt women. So I've always maintained that irrespective of our gender, we need to ensure that we respect not only women, but every individual's choice or right to wear what they want or eat what they want.
Yes, ma'am. So the BJP manifesto in West Bengal arguably does place a large amount of importance on the women of the state, who make up about 48% of the electorate. However, the TMC as well has propelled about 250 women-centric schemes centered around empowerment, economic rehabilitation, and education. Would you argue that the BJP has done enough to counter who many term Bengal ki beti, or the daughter of Bengal?
I think that when we talk about why look at women's issues, the narrative has been changed, Ritika, by the Prime Minister. For too many years, we heard about women's development. And the Prime Minister said, for an economy as ours to grow stronger, we need to ensure that women lead that development. So there has been an extreme change in the way women's issues are now focused upon by administration. For instance, let me give you two examples of it. One is the national education policy. I had the privilege of starting the base document when I was a Minister of Education in the first term of Narendra Modi's political tenure or official tenure as Prime Minister. And if you look at the national education policy, which comes after 3 decades, it is extremely pertinent to note it has a special gender inclusion fund, never before done in the academic administration of our country. Now, if you look at issues like menstruation, there was a presumption that menstruation is not a right-wing political approach. Men in the right wing would never talk about it. However, India's first menstrual hygiene administrative protocol was set by Narendra Modi. So it breaks two myths. One, that if it comes to gender responsive administration, it can only be done by women. Narendra Modi has proved that even a man can do it. And second, that gender response is more of a liberal ideological space, not a right-wing space or a conservative space. So let me give you another example, the medical termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks. And this issue has been pending in our country since the 1970s, which got passed in 2020. Again, not by a liberal so-called government, but by Narendra Modi's government. So when you talk about women's issues, Narendra Modi, when he was asked about how he managed to win Bihar and what was that secret X factor behind his victory, he said women. Because if you look at demographical studies of voters, it has been found that whenever politicians deliver on issues of development, it is the women voters who come out in large number and continue to support such political establishments. So even in the state of West Bengal, Mamata Bandyopadhyay made rape a political instrument. If there were women who were ideologically not aligned with her party, they were subject to violence. And that is why in my campaign, Ritika, across the state, especially in the rural sector, I saw woman after woman. There were times when I would just go in the middle of a village, stand on a parapet with a mic, and had woman after woman just come to hear me speak. Why? Because we were speaking on issues of safety, we were speaking on issues of education, we were speaking on issues of sanitation, and they know that these are the issues on which Narendra Modi delivers on.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I want to ask about the profile of women voters, first in West Bengal. What do you think is the profile of voters in West Bengal? And do you think that it is different to women in other states in India? And did that have an impact on the BJP's manifesto in the state?
Abrar, the profile of any woman in India is this. We hope the best of all facilities be given to every woman, irrespective of her political or geographical demography. So to say that the aspirations of Bengali women will be different from women in Kerala or Uttar Pradesh, I think would be a tad bit unfair to women at large. Ask any woman. I had the privilege of engaging with the International Parliamentary Union over a decade ago as an MP. And I still remember that meeting in Uganda where we had French ministers and we had politicians from African nations, we had politicians, female representatives from the EU. Uh, all of us sat together, and at the end of our discussion, we realized, irrespective of our languages, our issues were the same.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, in response to Prime Minister Modi's annual interaction with students across India, called Pariksha Pe Charcha, many have called him a balanced energy in an otherwise haphazard time of exams. As the Minister for Women and Child Development, what schemes has the government instituted to benefit students, especially in this year and last year when nothing seems to be going right in this year?
So, Ritika, as a mother of a 12th standard student who has a daughter waiting for this pandemic to get over so that she could sit for her exams, I must say here that we had the privilege in the year 2014 to begin digitization of the entire curriculum, which at that time many people questioned. But in the times of pandemic, people have appreciated that now academic instruments are made available to people free of cost. The entire curriculum, especially for those who don't have an opportunity to access them physically, given lockdowns or given the impact of the pandemic. Secondly, even in the area of higher education, I had the privilege of starting a project called Swayam, wherein we started over 1,000 higher educational courses online. And I remember at that time I was told that why would any higher education student or college going student come on a portal to study? That was the year 2014-15. However, today we have over 10 million students who have logged on. So if you look at leveraging of technology and digitization of educational prospects for our citizens, that is the one big step. I also think that our country never had a credit system which was for our students dynamic in nature. We established the first credit system in our country, which helped a student even migrate from one city or state to another seamlessly, or one institution to another seamlessly. Additionally, I must here add, there was a special emphasis given to women in science and young girls in science. We recognize that early on in life, women have a challenge of being given opportunities to engage with mathematics and science. The government particularly engaged with young girls on issues of maths and science. I also must here highlight that we have in our country over 1,600 dialects and 22 constitutionally recognized languages. So now our endeavor is to ensure that there is a democratization of academics, wherein academic agendas or curriculum are not only restricted to the English language or to Hindi, but available in all regional languages, including dialects and including tribal languages. So I think that to have these many instruments available in a variety of, I think, digital platforms is something that has helped us tide over this challenge with regards to the pandemic. I must here also highlight that the Prime Minister was insistent that children with special needs get special support during these times. So we had in our government an allocation done for special educators or children who do not have devices. Even they need to get that additional support from establishment, which was arranged by the Modi government. So when you talk about Pariksha Pe Charcha, Narendra Modi is one of his greatest passion is the field of education. And you see that he's hands-on, not only with children, but also academia.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Smriti Irani ji, as we draw this interview to a close and look at our last two sections, I wanted to spend one question talking about social media and the new age of campaigning. So since social media has become such a big part of elections with digital rallies and of the sort, would you argue that there are many narratives that sometimes distract from the on-the-ground reality? And would you say that the social media acts as a boon or a bane in electioneering?
I think that any instrument that you have for amplification of your voice is a welcome instrument as long as it's responsibly used. And I think that social media has its own set of challenges, but the greater advantage is its ability to connect people irrespective of boundaries or borders. And I think especially in times of crisis, when I talk about responsible use of social media, so we have seen citizens reach out to each other in times of crisis, try and get administrative or societal help. But we've also seen some who want instant fame and glory attract attention to themselves with false news. Or for that matter, like I said abroad towards the beginning of my conversation, that when you create a myth or a fallacy about vaccine use and debunk science, then some people use this very technology to spread word about the vaccine and say, don't take it. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think the only saving grace is responsible use.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, what according to you will Indian politics look like in 2022?
Tell me with heart on your hand, Ritika. Everybody who told you, what does 1st of January 2020 look like? Everybody who told you, tell me what does 1st of January 2021 look like? How did you respond? I think that in 2022, or for that matter, the next 10 years, the pandemic comes with new lessons. New lessons in administration, new lessons in humanity, new lessons in how we engage with each other as communities. And I think much will change. Ritika, remember this, that before the pandemic struck, work from home was a female concept. Most women who gave birth were told, okay, you can work from home. And for them, that was a death knell in their career. Now, work from home as much a female, but is also a male concept. It is not looked upon as a death knell. In fact, it's looked upon as a safe opportunity to engage, a constructive opportunity to engage. So what does 2022 hold for leadership across the world? Nobody would be unwise enough to predict it. But what I can assure you is that irrespective of the challenges, the 1.3 billion Indians that we have in my country and those who are spread across the world, I can say with absolute guarantee that they will be in service of a better future as people, as government, as a civilization.
Smriti Irani ji, very lastly, we'd like to ask you, as we look into 2024 and the country's next general election, how, if, do you see the country's political landscape changing?
Well, I can only say this. I again come possibly to one such conversation and thank the people of India for yet again electing Narendra Modi.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
And with that, we conclude the One India Talks. On behalf of the London School of Economics and the LSE South Asia Society, we want to thank you for speaking with us today, ma'am. It's been an honor hearing from you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. My best wishes for both you and abroad.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It was a pleasure hearing from you. On part of Ritika and myself, we want to extend our gratitude to everyone at the London School of Economics Student Union and the South Asia Society for providing us the platform to conduct the first ever London School of Economics Presents One India Talks. A special shout out to NISAO for all their support and to Professor Mukhalika Banerjee for all her wisdom and wise words. It has been a true honor bringing you the LSE One India Talks. Thank you very much for watching.